Hello and welcome to the Knowledge Center here at Itron Utility Week 2018. My name's Adam Malik and I'm joined now by Steve Hambric, who's the Vice President for Distributed Energy Management at Itron. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for making the time to be here, and we're going to dive straight into it. You are part of the division at Itron that came as part of the acquisition with Converge. Just to put everything into context, can you tell us a little bit about the industry trends that you're seeing in terms of distributed energy management or demand side management?
Absolutely. We're at a crossroads in the utility industry for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to talk about a couple of challenges and then a couple of opportunities that are both happening at the same time. So in terms of challenges, we have flat or declining load growth. So the typical earnings model for utilities was built upon ever-growing capital base. That is changing.
So that's down to energy efficiency programs?
That's exactly right. The energy efficiency programs have worked, which is fantastic. And so we need to adapt. And then the second factor is distributed energy resources. So in the past, customers used to have very standard load profiles. We could predict residential customers in particular all pretty much look the same. Now at DERs, we're seeing very different kinds of behaviors. And a customer with a Nest thermostat, solar panels, and an EV could be the grid's best friend or your worst nightmare, depending on how those resources are deployed. So those are the challenges to the utility model. Some people talk about a death spiral. I don't believe that's true, but they do clearly create operational and financial challenges. Now, the other side, we have these great connected networks and pretty much ubiquitous connectivity and connected devices finding their way into homes. So on the same devices that are creating part of these challenges utilities are facing can be a resource for utilities. And that's really what we find ourselves in now, is a real evolution where demand response was the system level resource for averting summer peaking events to now being necessary for day-to-day resiliency and reliability.
And to give the network that flexibility as the sort of intermittent generation comes
That's exactly right.
So one of the things that in the other interviews I did yesterday, where the utilities were saying about this trend about bring your own devices, bring your own thermostat or whatever it is, because in the past, whenever we've heard about these rollouts, like let's say British Gas in the UK, a part of it has been about shipping the device to the customer. Whereas now, people are saying, well, actually, the customers are buying these on devices. They want that choice. How do we get? But it seems like a big issue for them. There seems to be, a desire. But where does the issue actually lie with it?
Well, the model's changed. It used to be that utilities would drive programs into households. And so the connected devices and the available loads were all driven directly through utility installed devices. Now we're seeing customers want to take control of their own energy, both in terms of bill savings, but probably more frequently comfort and convenience are driving this change. So customers are buying things like EVs and connected thermostats, et cetera. And again, going back to the original premise, they create both a problem and an opportunity. If the utility isn't in the game and someone has a Nest thermostat, they may be pre-cooling their home at the absolute worst time. They don't know they're on a flat rate. So what do they care? They're without a signal, without a program, without a price, a customer will just act in their own best interest, which in a flat rate is just comfort and total bill. What we're doing is an all-the-above approach to engage customers on their terms and turn them into an asset for the utility. And it's really a win-win-win because the customer benefits, they get technology, they get incentives, they get to be part of a program, they know they're doing the right thing. The utility solves a real problem that these DERs can be creating, delivering flatter, more manageable, controllable load curves. And then even the customers that aren't in the program benefit because their rates are lower. We need less infrastructure, we have less of a peaking problem.
And then from your side, are you delivering that as a service? Because that's another thing that, when I started commentating on this industry 4 or 5 years ago, delivering anything as a service was an anathema almost, right? It was like, how could we possibly let someone else deliver that as a service. Is that another trend that's coming through?
It has to by definition, frankly. These third-party devices are being procured by consumers, so they by definition cannot be utility assets. So it becomes a service to manage those devices as part of a program. But I think, more importantly, what we're seeing is utilities migrating to a world where they want to purchase an outcome. So instead of saying, well, I want to install these switches or these thermostats and I want to run this program, it's more of a, how can you get me 50 megawatts under these terms in these locations, and how can you guarantee me that I get this outcome over time? Like, that starts to get real interesting, because now we're aligning the interests of us, the vendor, the utility, the regulator, and the ultimate consumers.
So can we build out on that a little bit more? Because up until maybe a couple of years ago, I feel like a lot of these examples were a theoretical possibility rather than a real-world delivery. And it'd be quite nice if you can bring to life some of the real-world experience, because you have got customers who are actually doing this.
Absolutely.
And they're succeeding as part
That's
of it
right.
as well.
One of to me, the most interesting examples, and this really changes the utility earnings paradigm. Central Hudson is a great customer of ours in about an hour north of New York. And what they've deployed is a targeted demand management program where they are deferring capital through the targeted deployment of DERs. So the way our contract works with them is we deliver these megawatts as a service on the terms that we've agreed upon. And as we defer capital, the savings from that deferral is actually split. 70% goes to customers in the form of lower rates, and 30% goes to utility shareholders in increased earnings. And we're only compensated for delivering what we said we were going to deliver on time. So we get kind of recurring payments as we continue to perform per the contract.
So is it more like a service level agreement?
Absolutely, yeah. And certainly we're tied at the hip with Central Hudson in terms of they're their customers, it's their data. We're designing this program and delivering it together. But ultimately, in terms of the economics, we've really again aligned all four of those stakeholders: ratepayers and program participants, utility shareholders, regulators, and then us, the vendor. We all win together. And if the program doesn't deliver, frankly, the ratepayers are insulated from that, and us, the vendor, and Central Hudson, the utility, takes the hit for that. And this is a model we're seeing a lot of geographies emulate, and we see a lot of growth here.
Why do you think it is so important for the utility to have these other business models? Because, I was looking at the resourcefulness report that came out of Itron. In two of the stats, there's a conflict. You've got ratepayers saying it costs too much. You've got utility executives saying we're not being paid enough to invest in the infrastructure because you need to put in AMI and all those sort of things. It's like, how do you see us breaking that Gordian knot, for want of a better word?
Utility, the earning model for utility is meant to compensate them for taking risk. And for lack of a better mechanism, we've assumed capital equals risk. And certainly capital is a form of risk, but there's other types of risk utilities can take, in particular in deploying DERs, and they deserve to be compensated for that. And I think it's crazy to ask a utility to try to solve a problem in different ways that goes against how their shareholders are compensated. And we're seeing a lot of traction in this area. And again, going back to that Central Hudson example, to me that's a perfect example of breaking that Gordian knot of saying, no, you can actually earn more by not upgrading that substation today, by not building a new transmission line. If you're able to defer that capital, in a cost-effective way that's in everyone's best interest, we will compensate you for doing the right thing. And that's an excellent model, and we plan to pursue that with our utility partners to the extent they see opportunities.
How much of this is also being driven by what's happening at the edge in terms of, and I'm talking specifically here about smart homes, where we have other actors that are not necessarily in the energy space really creating a shift in the smart home and that sort of thing. Are you guys watching that trend? Are you guys tapping into that as well?
We are all over it. And in this new world, everyone's a partner. And our role is, we're trying to optimize the distribution networks for utilities. And utilities are investing in these awesome networks And what we want to do is use those networks to give visibility into what's happening in the distribution system and what's happening in the home, and then use that connectivity to provide control, to again turn those assets that those third parties are turning up with, to the extent it makes sense, get them grid connected, turn them into assets that the utility can use to, again, keep rates low and drive reliability, and going back to the earlier discussion, be compensated for it.
And on that compensation, just to sort of finish off the interview, because it's quite a nice narrative, we've kind of set up where the opportunities are, but for someone to build a business case around this, where is the compensation coming from? Because I had an interview yesterday where that particular utility was using this opportunity to work in the flexibility market. Others were using it to have a different type of revenue model back. Is there one that's coming out, or is it still that fragmented?
It's pretty fragmented. Some great examples. We have utilities that use our program to manage their demand charges, to keep the rates lower. Some monetize them in capacity markets, PJM, MISO, et cetera. Other utilities look for kind of creative performance-based rate making, where they're paid for the performance of the asset relative to goals, or in the case of Central Hudson, how much savings it generates. And other utilities capitalize it, and they do the installation. They're able to capitalize that asset and earn off it, again, while doing the right thing for ratepayers. So unfortunately, in the U.S. in particular, but in international markets, it's still, we're still in 50 different markets with overlapping ISOs and overlapping weather and other market dynamics acting on them. So I would say we just try to be as flexible as we can and partner with utilities to get it done.
But what you're saying is that unlike 4 years ago, more often than not, a business case can be found and
absolutely.
It does work, and the orders of magnitudes are in the millions, aren't they?
In the hundreds of millions in many cases.
That is a great place to leave it.
All right.
Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us on the stage, and thank you as well for watching this interview here at the Knowledge Center at Itron Utility Week.